Welcome back, everyone. It's the lawyer you know, and today we're going to talk about cryptocurrency, and more specifically, Bitcoin. By now, everyone's heard about Bitcoin. It's a huge fad. People are buying it, selling it, mining it, you name it. A lot of people don't really understand what it is or how it works, but this was an idea born out of the late 90s, and people have been working on this and creating it and adjusting it and changing it, coming up with new ways to get cryptocurrency, create cryptocurrency, and add value to cryptocurrency. But how did it all begin? How did it all start? Well, there was a guy by the name of Satoshi Nakamoto who was the original creator of Bitcoin. But there was a pseudonym, and no one ever knew who this actually was. Until more recently, a guy by the name of Craig Wright came out and said he was Nakamoto, and other people confirmed that. But now we don't know if that is true. If only there was a way to officially and legally find out who this Nakamoto is. Well, lucky for us, there is a lawsuit that has been filed that may give us that answer, and the trial starts in November. So I'm taking a few minutes in this video to break down and give a quick background of what's going on in this case, what we can hope to see at trial, and what we think is going to happen at the conclusion of this federal trial right here in our home state of Florida. So stay with me till the end of the video. If you are interested in this case and this cryptocurrency content, make sure you like this video, leave a comment below, and make sure you subscribe to our page so you don't miss any update videos as this trial is going on. So now let's break down what's going on in Kleiman v. Wright. So generally speaking, this case centers around two men, Dave Kleiman and Craig Wright. Craig Wright is from Australia, Dave Kleiman is from Florida. That is why this case has been filed in the Southern District of Florida. Dave Kleiman was there. Now, Dave Kleiman passed away in 2013, but his brother, Ira Kleiman, is his personal representative of his estate, and he is technically bringing this lawsuit on his brother's estate's behalf. Now, the two men in question here potentially were two of the men that started Bitcoin, found Bitcoin, created Bitcoin, mined Bitcoin, whatever you want to call it. They were first to market on it. At least that's what it seems. So these two guys potentially had a partnership. At least that's what Ira Kleiman is claiming in his lawsuit. He is saying his brother Dave, who was a computer guy, and this guy Craig from Australia was also a computer guy, and they came up with this idea and they did it together, and therefore the 1.1 million Bitcoins that Craig Wright has should be split 50% to Dave's estate and 50% to Craig Wright. Right now, Craig Wright owns 100% of them. But there are all sorts of convoluted details throughout this case. The first thing, why is this case important? Well, there's a few things that may be determined throughout this case. First, the value of these Bitcoins. Experts have valued it somewhere between $11 billion with a B and $27 billion. And with that type of valuation, it makes it one of the biggest civil cases ever in Florida. So we'll see what that value is. Another thing people want to know is, will we determine whether or not Craig Wright is Satoshi Nakamoto, the pseudonym used for the person who came up with Bitcoin? I don't think that's something that's going to come out in this case, but we'll see. Additionally, we will see if you can actually get your hands on these Bitcoins to pay a verdict, a judgment, a settlement when a dispute arises as to who owns what Bitcoin. Because throughout this case, settlement discussions have begun and started and actually gotten traction between these two parties, until it was determined that Craig Wright, the defendant, could not get his hands on enough money to finance a settlement like this. And it comes down to whether or not he can access some blind trust that was created way back when and where this Bitcoin is controlled. He has tried to do everything he can to hide info about this trust, even using attorney-client privilege, saying the trustee is his attorney. Therefore, he can't turn over these documents. And throughout the 3+ years of litigation, this lawsuit was filed back in 2018, which is 5 years after Dave Kleiman passed away. But Ira Kleiman filed this lawsuit and has been fighting it for 3 years. And at every step, the defense is trying to block discovery, trying to not provide information to the plaintiff that is relevant to this case. And the judge has continuously ruled against Craig Wright. So much so that they have sanctioned the defendant And at one point, a magistrate made a decision that Craig Wright loses. He struck all of his affirmative defenses and said, Craig Wright, you have to give 50% of all your Bitcoin and intellectual property from 2014 and before to Ira Kleiman, to Dave Kleiman's estate. And he just made a ruling, basically. And people were like, whoa, is the case over? Well, Craig Wright's lawyers objected and filed a motion saying the magistrate can't do that. Those are all factual questions that need to be made by the jury. And just because the judge found a discovery violation, he can sanction the defendant, something that is connected to that discovery violation. Like if you don't provide documents, you can't use them to help you at trial. If you don't do what the court says, you can be sanctioned and fined money. You can even be thrown in jail. But you can't just say you lose because you didn't find these documents. And the higher court judge in the Southern District of Florida ruled with Craig Wright and saying, yeah, the case isn't over. The magistrate may have overstepped its bounds, so this case is going to go to trial. There's all sorts of details as to what experts we can expect to see at trial. Both want to provide handwriting experts because there's allegations that Craig Wright fraudulently created these fake contracts and fake deeds saying, I, Dave Kleiman, sign over everything to you. No witnesses, no notaries, no lawyers, nothing. He just signed 7 figures over to his buddy before he died. There's also some experts that Craig Wright wants to bring in about the physical and mental health of Dave Kleiman before he passed away, saying there's no way he could have had a big hand in this, and there's no way that Craig Wright would have made him a partner if you knew that there was cocaine in his system, that there was feces and blood and all sorts of disgust in his apartment when he was found dead with a gun with a bullet hole in the mattress. But his actual cause of death was complications with MRSA, because he wasn't taking care of himself, because he had become paralyzed after a motorcycle accident and his family wasn't taking care of him. Craig Wright wants all that to come out. Well, Kleiman objected and the judge ruled mostly in favor with Kleiman that they couldn't basically make the family look bad or make him look like a cocaine addict, but they could bring in some physical and mental health to see, could Dave Kleiman have even been capable of creating a monster like Bitcoin, and could he have been in this process with Craig Wright? All sorts of things. There are handwriting experts, as I said, to talk about these contracts and whether or not he actually signed them. There are also experts on Bitcoin, because you better believe an average jury that you put up there is not going to know everything about Bitcoin. And if you want to learn about the background of Bitcoin, I encourage you to go look at this lawsuit, because they do a good job describing and explaining exactly what Bitcoin is and the issues and things that come with it. Every objection you can think of, every motion to dismiss, motion for summary judgment has been filed in this case. For the most part, they've been denied, except Wright was successful in some of his motions to dismiss of misappropriation and certain fraud counts, even though the judge seems to be angled against Mr. Wright, who is the defendant in this case, and I'll read you some of their quotes now. And you tell me whether or not you think this angles in favor of Craig Wright or against. So, in the motion to dismiss, the court finds that the plaintiff, meaning Ira Kleiman, has sufficiently alleged a claim for conversion, meaning that Wright took what belonged to Kleiman, converted it to his own benefit, basically. The amended complaint alleged defendant converted at least 300,000 Bitcoins upon Dave's death and transferred them to various international trusts, which was an unauthorized act that deprived the plaintiffs of Bitcoins therein. Accordingly, their claim for conversion survives. Now, the misappropriation of trade secrets, they were thrown out in the motion to dismiss. Let's hear some other quotes. So, at one point, Wright was arguing that because of all these inconsistencies and all these problems, there's not enough evidence, there's no merit to this case, and the judge says, Wright seems to argue that even though his numerous conflicting statements are the very reason confusion has been created, the court should nonetheless use these statements as a basis to challenge the court's subject matter jurisdiction. In weighing the evidence, the court simply does not find the defendant's testimony to be credible. That is not good if you're the defendant in a federal lawsuit. The magistrate judge that, again, tried to just basically throw the case out for the defendant and rule in favor of the plaintiff said that he declines to rely on this kind of document, which was produced by Wright, which could have easily been generated by anyone with word processing software and a pen. Another statement by the actual federal judge. The court is puzzled by the defendant's apparent argument that Judge Reinhart must blindly accept its items produced by the defendant, such that Judge Reinhart cannot rely on his past experiences with defendant in this litigation, including his history of providing forged materials and giving perjured testimony in evaluating whether or not the defendant has carried his burden as to the privilege. That is not how fact-finding works. Not good. Okay, so this has not looked good for the defendant, Wright, in this case, throughout the procedural history. So that's going to give you a little indication of how the judges expect this trial to go. And the judges are good because they're unbiased. They're just listening to each thing the lawyers say, and they come into a case somewhat similarly to how a jury comes into the case. Now, the judge has legal background. They've seen lots of other cases, so they have a lot more knowledge, obviously, surrounding these circumstances. But a jury's going to come in, and judges do not often say that defendants, plaintiffs, any party in a case provides perjured testimony or forged materials or anything fraudulent like both judges have done handling this case. So that to me gives a big indication of how I think jurors are going to respond to Mr. Wright's testimony. And he will take the stand, obviously, in this case, and he is going to be his most important witness. There's a lot of legal intricacies to this case because the main plaintiff who can testify as to what happened and that he was a partner, because that's what this case is all about. Was there a partnership between these two guys, and does Kleiman deserve half of the proceeds that this partnership produced? That's what it's really going to come down to. And you don't have Dave Kleiman to testify. So what do you have? You've got Craig Wright, who it seems like nobody believes or necessarily likes as a witness, but you do have emails, documents, and a paper trail to how all of this happened over the years, because this idea was born out of the 1990s. And over 20 years, it's been created and turned into what it is today. And one of the good things about Bitcoin is that it's supposed to be trackable. And Craig Wright says he created it so that it would be a currency that couldn't be used in criminal actions because it could all be tracked. It's turned into exactly the opposite. It's on the black market, it can be hidden, it can be lost, it can be stolen with no repercussions. So we'll see what this does to the future of Bitcoin. All eyes are going to be on this trial if you're interested in cryptocurrency. This is going to be something that is just paramount to how the world looks at cryptocurrency in the future. So one of the last things I want to mention is because of all these inconsistencies and all these problems with Wright's testimony, one of the experts Craig Wright wants to bring and is going to be allowed to bring is a mental health expert that diagnosed him with being on the spectrum for autism. And he's blaming his inconsistencies and some of his weird testimony on that. And the judge is allowing that as a defense to these inconsistent statements. The judge says, for instance, as plaintiffs note, defendant's testimony has been glaringly inconsistent at numerous junctures. Defendant, however, stresses that he has been diagnosed as being on the autism spectrum, and thus his testimony needs to be evaluated in that light. Doesn't mean he's allowed to lie. It just means the jury is allowed to consider whether autism has an effect on his ability to explain what happened or what he's thinking or how he thinks something happened or how he may have reacted based on him being on the spectrum. And the jury will get to decide that. This is a wild ride. I'm trying to give you the background. I'm trying to give you what to expect in trial. It's going to be a federal trial in the Southern District of Florida. We will be able to follow it. We do know this jurisdiction. We have practiced there before. We have cases there currently. We've practiced all over the state in federal courts and state courts, so we know how these cases work. This is a big civil trial. It's basically conversion. You took something that belongs to me, converted it, and now you're using it for your benefit. So if you are interested in this case and you want us to follow this case and you're still with me on this video that I know has been convoluted and coming from all different angles, make sure you leave a comment below that says Bitcoin or post whatever your favorite cryptocurrency is in the comments below, and I will follow this trial and give weekly updates as to what is happening in the federal trial of Kleiman versus Wright to see what are we going to learn. Are we going to learn how to evaluate Bitcoin? Are we going to learn how many shares were split between them? And if they were actually the first to mine and produce and create these Bitcoins, and if so, can they access them to finance a judgment or a jury verdict in this case? Lots of stuff happening here, not just your average everyday civil lawsuit. So if you're interested, drop your favorite cryptocurrency below in the comments and we'll come back for more. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our page for more of the same. Thanks for watching this episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you like this content, please share it with your friends. Make sure you subscribe to our page and like our videos. If you want some interaction, get in the comments and we'll be sure to get back to you. If you want to know any more information about our firm or this page, you can find out in the description or visit tragoslaw.com. We post multiple times throughout the week, so make sure you hit that bell so you can get the notification and not miss out on the next episode.